My son traveled 520 kilometers to find me. He arrived injured and carrying luggage. Mom, my wife tried to kill me. She knows about your $38 million and she's coming here. I silently picked up my phone and dialed. The moment we were waiting for has come. Subscribe to the channel for more stories like this, and comment the city you're watching from. The sound of pounding on my front door at 11:37 at night made my blood freeze. Living alone in this quiet neighborhood for the past 15 years, I'd grown accustomed to silence after dark. The desperate, frantic knocking wasn't random. Someone knew exactly where I lived. I wrapped my robe tighter around my 59-year-old frame and peered through the peephole. My heart nearly stopped. Brandon stood there, my 32-year-old son, clutching 2 suitcases with blood trickling down his left temple. His usually perfectly styled hair was disheveled, his expensive shirt torn at the shoulder. Brandon! I fumbled with the locks, my hands trembling. What happened to you? He stumbled inside, dropping his bags with a heavy thud that echoed through my modest living room. The contrast was stark, my son, who lived in a $1 million home across state lines, standing in my simple apartment that I decorated with second-hand furniture and clearance store finds. Mom, I drove 323 miles to get here. He gasped, pressing his palm against the bleeding wound. I couldn't stop. She would have found me. I guided him to my worn couch, the same one I'd bought at a garage sale 12 years ago. Who would have found you? Brandon, you're scaring me. His eyes darted toward the window, then back to me. The fear in them was something I'd never seen before, not even when he was a scared little boy afraid of thunderstorms. Melissa tried to kill me tonight. The words hit me like a physical blow. Melissa, his wife of 4 years, the woman who'd slowly but systematically distanced him from me. The same woman who'd convinced him I was too poor, too embarrassing to be part of their social circle. That's impossible, I whispered, though something cold was spreading through my chest. Melissa loves you. Brandon let out a bitter laugh that made my skin crawl. She found out, Mom. She knows about your $38 million. The world tilted. My carefully constructed life, 15 years of playing the role of the struggling single mother, the woman who clipped coupons and bought generic groceries, came crashing down in that moment. I don't know what you're talking about, I said automatically, but my voice betrayed me. Don't lie to me anymore. His voice cracked. She showed me the papers, the bank statements, everything. She's been investigating you for months, Mom. She knows about the offshore accounts, the investments, all of it. I sank into my threadbare armchair, the weight of decades of secrets pressing down on me. How did she? She hired a private investigator. Brandon winced as he touched his head again. She's been planning this for over a year. Tonight she tried to poison my dinner. When that didn't work fast enough, she came at me with a kitchen knife. The image of sweet, petite Melissa wielding a weapon seemed impossible, yet the evidence was sitting bloodied and broken in my living room. I managed to fight her off and grab some clothes, he continued. But before I left, she screamed something at me that made my blood run cold. She said she was coming here next, that she was going to finish what she started with both of us. My hands moved automatically to my cell phone. With steady fingers that surprised even me, I dialed a number I'd memorized 23 years ago, but had hoped never to use. Francis here, I said when the voice answered on the second ring. The moment we've been waiting for has arrived. Brandon stared at me, confusion mixing with the fear in his eyes. Mom, who are you calling? I hung up and looked at my son, really looked at him. The man I'd raised, protected, and loved more than my own life. The child I'd sacrificed everything for, including my own identity. Brandon, there are things about our past, about your father, that you don't know. Things I've kept hidden to protect you. What are you talking about? He leaned forward, ignoring the blood now dripping onto his expensive shirt. And who did you just call? I walked to my bedroom and returned with a small metal box I kept hidden behind my winter coats. Inside were documents, photos, and evidence of a life I'd buried so deep, I sometimes forgot it existed. Your father wasn't the man who died in that car accident when you were 7, I said quietly. That was a lie. I told you to keep you safe. Brandon's face went pale. What? Your real father is very much alive, and he's one of the most dangerous men I've ever known. The money you're talking about, it was never supposed to exist. It was supposed to be my silence fee, Payment for disappearing and never speaking about what I witnessed. I opened the box and pulled out a photograph of a man with Brandon's same jawline and dark eyes, but with a coldness that made my stomach turn even after all these years. This is Marcus Volkov. He's your biological father, and he's the reason we've been hiding for the past 23 years. Brandon took the photo with shaking hands. This man. He looks like me. You have his eyes and his stubborn streak, I said softly. But you have my heart, and that's what's kept us both alive. The phone in my hand buzzed with a text message. Extraction team en route. 20 minutes. Pack light. Brandon read the message over my shoulder. Mom, what the hell is going on? Extraction team? Who are you? I looked at my son, this beautiful man I'd raised in deliberate poverty to keep him invisible, to keep him safe. The charade was over. Melissa had seen to that. I used to be someone else entirely, I whispered. Someone who saw things she shouldn't have, who knows secrets that powerful people would kill to protect. But most importantly, I'm your mother, and I will not let anyone hurt you. Outside, the sound of a car engine grew closer, then stopped. Brandon and I both froze. Is that your extraction team? He whispered. I peered through the curtains and felt my heart stop. A black sedan sat in my driveway, engine still running. Through the windshield, I could make out a familiar silhouette. No, I breathed. That's Melissa. The black sedan idled in my driveway like a predator waiting to strike. Through the thin curtains of my living room window, I watched Melissa's silhouette behind the wheel. She wasn't moving, just sitting there in the darkness, and somehow that was more terrifying than if she'd come charging toward the house. Get away from the window, I whispered to Brandon, pulling him back into the hallway. My mind raced through possibilities, escape routes, weapons within reach. After 23 years of suburban anonymity, those old instincts came flooding back like muscle memory. How did she find us so fast? Brandon's voice was barely audible. She's been planning this longer than we realized. I moved toward the kitchen, staying low beneath the windows. Brandon, I need you to listen carefully. Everything I'm about to tell you will sound impossible, but your life depends on understanding the truth. I opened the cabinet beneath my kitchen sink and removed a panel I'd installed years ago. Hidden behind it was another phone. This one encrypted, along with fake identification documents and a loaded Glock 9mm that I'd hoped never to touch again. Brandon's eyes widened. Jesus, Mom. Who are you? 26 years ago, I was Frances McKenna, but everyone called me Frankie. I checked the gun's safety, my hand steady despite the chaos in my heart. I worked as a forensic accountant for the FBI, specializing in organized crime financial networks. The weight of the weapon felt familiar, like greeting an old friend I tried to forget. Brandon slumped against the kitchen counter, the color draining from his already pale face. Your father, Marcus Volkov, ran the largest money laundering operation on the East Coast. We'd been building a case against him for 3 years when I made a critical mistake. I fell in love with him. You were undercover? Brandon's voice cracked. Deep cover. I spent 18 months as his accountant, gaining his trust, collecting evidence. But Marcus was different from other criminals I'd encountered. He was intelligent, charming, and he made me believe he was trying to go legitimate. I moved to the living room window again, peering through a gap in the curtains. Melissa hadn't moved, but I could see the glow of her phone screen. She was making calls. When I got pregnant with you, everything changed. I thought I could convince Marcus to leave that life behind, to build something real with our family. The memory still stung after all these years. I was 7 months pregnant when I discovered the truth about what he really was. Brandon wrapped his arms around himself. What truth? He wasn't just laundering money, sweetheart. He was trafficking women, children, anyone he could profit from. I found files, photographs, evidence of horrors I couldn't unsee. My voice broke slightly. Some of those victims weren't much older than you are now. I remembered that night vividly. Standing in Marcus's home office at 2 a.m, my pregnant belly pressed against his desk as I photographed document after document with a hidden camera. The moment I understood that the man I loved was a monster. I tried to build a case to bring him down, but he discovered what I was doing before I could act. The night you were born, Marcus held you in his arms and told me exactly what would happen if I ever betrayed him. Brandon's hands clenched into fists. What did he say? He said he would make sure you suffered for every year I'd stolen from him. That he would sell you to the same buyers who took those other children, and he'd make me watch. The memory of Marcus's voice, cold and matter-of-fact as he threatened our newborn baby, still gave me nightmares. He bounced Brandon gently while describing in detail how he'd destroy our son's life. 2 weeks later, I made a deal with the devil himself. What kind of deal? I agreed to disappear completely. Never testify, never speak his name, never contact the FBI again. In exchange, he'd wire $38 million into an offshore account and give us a 72-hour head start before he started hunting. I pulled out the old documents from my hidden box, showing Brandon bank transfers dated 31 years ago. I thought it was enough to keep us safe forever. I changed our names, moved us across the country, and spent the next 15 years living like we were broke so no one would ask questions about where our money came from. But you kept the money? I kept it because I knew someday we might need it to survive. Every dollar was insurance against the day he might find us. Brandon ran his hands through his hair, leaving streaks of dried blood on his forehead. Why didn't you ever tell me? Because I wanted you to have a normal life. I wanted you to fall in love, get married, have children, build a career. All the things you couldn't do if you knew we were living under a death sentence. My encrypted phone buzzed with another message. Hostile vehicle detected. Recommend immediate extraction. Team in 12 minutes. Mom, who's coming to get us? People who owe me favors from my old life. People who've been watching from a distance, making sure Marcus never found us. Through the window, I saw Melissa's car door open. She stepped out wearing all black, her usually perfect blonde hair pulled back in a tight ponytail. Even from this distance, I could see she was carrying something in her right hand. She's armed, I whispered. Brandon moved toward the window, but I grabbed his arm. Stay back. She's not the woman you married, Brandon. She's something else entirely. What do you mean? Think about it. How does a small-town real estate agent afford a private investigator capable of uncovering offshore accounts and buried identities? How does she know which financial records to search for? How did she find out about Marcus? The pieces were falling into place, creating a picture that made my blood run cold. Someone sent her, didn't they? Brandon's voice was barely a whisper. I think your wife has been working for your father from the beginning. The words hung in the air between us like a death sentence. Brandon's face went through a series of emotions: denial, anger, grief, and finally, a cold understanding that broke my heart. He's been watching us this whole time? And waiting for the perfect opportunity to destroy us both. Outside, Melissa had reached our front porch. Through the peephole, I could see her clearly now, the woman my son had loved for 4 years, the one who'd convinced him his mother was too poor and embarrassing to be part of their life. She looked exactly the same, but knowing what I now suspected, everything about her seemed different. Predatory. Calculating. She raised her hand and knocked on the door. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. Francis, she called in her sweet, familiar voice. I know you're in there with Brandon. We need to talk. Melissa's voice through the door was sickeningly sweet, the same tone she'd used when she first met me 4 years ago. Back then, I'd thought she was nervous about making a good impression on her boyfriend's mother. Now I understood it had been something else entirely. A predator sizing up her prey. Francis, don't make this harder than it needs to be, she called again. I just want to have a conversation. Brandon looked at me with eyes full of betrayal and confusion. The man I'd raised was struggling to reconcile the woman he'd loved with the monster standing on our doorstep. How long do we have until your people get here? He whispered. I checked my encrypted phone. 8 minutes. What if she doesn't wait that long? Through the peephole, I watched Melissa examine our front door, running her fingers along the frame like she was looking for weak points. She moved with a confidence that was chilling. This wasn't a desperate woman acting on impulse. This was someone who'd done this before. She's going to try to get us to open the door, I whispered. Whatever she says, whatever she promises, don't believe her. Melissa stepped back from the door and tilted her head, as if she knew we were watching her. When she smiled, it wasn't the warm expression Brandon had fallen in love with. It was cold, calculating, and utterly without emotion. Brandon, honey, she called, her voice taking on a different quality, softer, more vulnerable. I know you're scared and confused. Your mother has been lying to you your whole life, hasn't she? I felt Brandon tense beside me. Even knowing what Melissa was, hearing her voice still affected him. For years of emotional manipulation doesn't disappear in a single night. She's kept you poor on purpose, made you think you had to struggle for everything while she sat on millions of dollars. What kind of mother does that to her own child? Don't listen to her, I breathed, but I could see the doubt creeping into Brandon's eyes. I bet she never even told you about your real father, did she? About Marcus Volkov and the empire that should have been yours by birthright. My blood went cold. She knew everything. Your father is a powerful man, Brandon. He's been looking for you for over 20 years. He wants to meet his son, to give you everything your mother stole from you. Brandon's jaw clenched. She's lying, right? Tell me she's lying about him looking for me. I couldn't answer because I didn't know. For 23 years, I'd lived with the assumption that Marcus was honoring our agreement, staying away as long as I remained silent. But if Melissa was working for him, if she'd orchestrated her entire relationship with Brandon, think about it, honey, Melissa continued, her voice growing stronger. How do you think I could afford that private investigator? How did I know where to look for information about your mother's hidden accounts? She paused, letting the implications sink in. Your father hired me to find you 3 years ago. But then something wonderful happened. I fell in love with you for real. I've been trying to protect you from him ever since. That's not true, I whispered, but doubt was creeping into my own mind. Why would she admit to working for Marcus if she was still loyal to him? Francis, I know you can hear me, Melissa called. Marcus is dying. Liver cancer. He has maybe 6 months left, and all he wants is to see his son before he goes. Brandon grabbed my arm. Is she telling the truth? I don't know, I admitted. I haven't had contact with anyone from that world in over 2 decades. He's willing to forgive everything, Melissa continued. The betrayal, the stolen money, the years of hiding. All he wants is 5 minutes with Brandon to apologize for the threats he made when he was angry. My encrypted phone buzzed. Extraction team delayed. Unknown vehicles blocking access roads. Recommend immediate relocation to safe house coordinates. Unknown vehicles. My hand started shaking as I read the message again. If Marcus's people were already positioning themselves around my neighborhood, we were trapped. Mom, what's wrong? Brandon noticed my expression. I showed him the message. We can't wait for extraction. We need to leave now. But how? She's right outside the front door. I looked toward the back of my small house. There's a service alley behind the kitchen. If we can make it to my car. A sound from the rear of the house made us both freeze. Glass breaking, followed by the soft thud of someone landing on my kitchen floor. She's not alone, I breathed. Heavy footsteps moved through my kitchen toward the living room where we stood. Brandon and I pressed ourselves against the hallway wall, and I raised my gun with hands that were steadier than I felt. A man appeared in the doorway, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing expensive clothes that couldn't hide the prison tattoos crawling up his neck. He looked at us with flat, emotionless eyes. Mrs. McKenna, he said in accented English. Mr. Volkov would like to see you both. Tell Mr. Volkov that our deal still stands, I replied, keeping my weapon trained on his center mass. I've kept my silence for 23 years. The man smiled, revealing gold teeth. Deal is finished. You broke terms when you hid his son from him. I never hid Brandon. We had an agreement. You had agreement to disappear. Not to steal his heir. Brandon stepped forward, and I saw something in his expression that reminded me terrifyingly of his father. My mother didn't steal anything. She protected me. Ah, the prince speaks. The man's smile widened. You look just like father when he was your age. Before prison, before scars, before cancer eat him from inside. Get out of my house. Brandon's voice was low, dangerous. Cannot do this. We have orders. From the front door, Melissa's voice changed completely, dropping all pretense of sweetness. Victor, are they secured? Working on it, the man called back. Victor. I stared at him with growing horror. Victor Petrov? His smile became genuinely pleased. You remember me. Good. Then you know I always complete my jobs. Victor Petrov had been Marcus's enforcer 26 years ago, The man responsible for ensuring that people who crossed the organization disappeared permanently. The fact that he was here in my living room meant that Marcus hadn't just broken our agreement. He'd been planning this for years. The cancer story, I said, understanding flooding through me. It's not true, is it? Oh, cancer is very real, Victor replied. But Marcus, he not dying yet. He wants to meet son while he's still strong enough to teach him family business. Brandon raised his hand slowly. What if I don't want to learn the family business? Victor's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered in his eyes. Then you join mother in shallow grave, and Marcus finds another heir. The casual way he spoke about our deaths made my stomach turn. This was what I'd been protecting Brandon from his entire life. Not just a criminal father, but a world where human life had no value beyond its usefulness to the organization. However, Victor continued, if you come willingly, if you listen to father's offer, then maybe everyone lives to see morning. What's his offer? Brandon asked. You join organization, learn business, take over when Marcus dies. In exchange, mother gets to live in comfortable retirement wherever she chooses. I looked at my son, seeing the wheels turning in his mind. He was actually considering it. Brandon, no, I said firmly. You don't understand what you'd be agreeing to. I understand that it might be the only way to keep you alive. Victor nodded approvingly. Smart boy. Just like father. From outside I heard car engines starting up. Multiple vehicles surrounding the house. Whatever chance we'd had of escaping was gone. So, Victor said, checking his watch. What is decision? Come peacefully and have conversation, or we do this hard way. Brandon looked at me one more time. His eyes filled with a pain that broke my heart. I'm sorry, Mom, but I can't let him hurt you because of choices you made before I was born. Brandon, I'll go with them. I'll hear what he has to say. But I want your word that my mother stays safe. Victor nodded. You have my word. As long as you cooperate. My son was sacrificing his freedom to protect me, just as I'd sacrificed my entire identity to protect him 23 years ago. The cycle was repeating itself, and I was powerless to stop it. The ride to Marcus's compound took 47 minutes through back roads I didn't recognize. Victor sat beside the driver while Brandon and I were squeezed into the back seat with another armed guard. Melissa followed in a separate car. Her true allegiance is now crystal clear. Brandon hadn't spoken since we left my house. He stared out the window with the same expression he'd worn as a child when he was working through a difficult problem. I wanted to reach for his hand to offer some comfort, but the guard between us made that impossible. Your son is smart to cooperate, Victor said, glancing back at us. Marcus, he rewards loyalty, punishes betrayal. But smart sons who make good choices, they live very comfortable lives. What happened to the other sons who didn't make good choices? I asked. Victor's smile was answer enough. The compound sat on 50 acres of wooded land behind gates that looked like they belonged to a fortress. As our convoy passed through the security checkpoint, I counted at least 8 armed guards and multiple surveillance cameras. This wasn't just a home. It was a military installation disguised as an estate. The main house was a sprawling modern structure that probably cost more than most people made in a lifetime. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered views of manicured gardens, and a lake that reflected the setting moon. It was beautiful in a cold, sterile way that reminded me exactly why I'd never wanted this life for Brandon. Impressive, yes? Victor noted my expression. Marcus built all this after you left. Business has been very good. We were escorted through marble hallways lined with expensive art. I recognized some of the pieces from FBI case files. Stolen works that had been missing for decades. Marcus hadn't just maintained his criminal empire. He'd expanded it into new territories. The study where they brought us felt like a throne room. Dark wood paneling, leather furniture arranged around a massive fireplace, and walls lined with books that I suspected no one had ever read. It was designed to intimidate, to make visitors feel small and insignificant. Marcus sat behind a desk the size of my kitchen table, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. 23 years had changed him. His dark hair was now silver, his face more lined, his frame thinner than I remembered. But his eyes were exactly the same. Intelligent, calculating, and utterly without warmth. Francis. His voice was softer than I expected, almost gentle. You look good. The years have been kind to you. Marcus. I managed to keep my voice steady. His gaze shifted to Brandon, and I watched his entire demeanor change. The cold businessman disappeared, replaced by something that looked almost like wonder. My God, he whispered, rising from his chair. You look exactly like I did at your age. Brandon stood perfectly still as his biological father approached. The resemblance was undeniable. They had the same jawline, the same dark eyes, the same way of holding themselves that commanded attention. 23 years, Marcus continued, stopping just out of arm's reach. 23 years I've wondered about you. Whether you were healthy, whether you were happy, whether you inherited any of my gifts. Your gifts. Brandon's voice was carefully neutral. Marcus smiled, and for a split second, I saw the man I'd once fallen in love with. Intelligence. Ambition. The ability to see opportunities that other people miss. He gestured toward the chairs arranged in front of his desk. Please sit. We have much to discuss. Reluctantly, Brandon and I took seats while Victor positioned himself near the door. Marcus returned to his throne behind the desk, but his attention remained fixed on his son. I suppose Frances has told you terrible stories about me, he said. Painted me as some kind of monster who threatened his own child. She told me you said you'd sell me to human traffickers, Brandon replied bluntly. Marcus winced as if the words physically pained him. I was angry, betrayed. The woman I loved had been lying to me for 18 months, building a case to destroy everything I'd worked for. He looked at me with something that might have been regret. I said things I didn't mean. Did you mean them when you said them? Brandon pressed. In that moment, yes. I wanted to hurt Frances the way she'd hurt me. I wanted her to understand that actions have consequences. Marcus leaned forward, his voice growing more intense. But I never would have followed through. You're my son, my blood. I would die before letting anyone harm you. I found my voice. Then why did you send Melissa to seduce him? Why the elaborate 4-year deception? Marcus's expression hardened. Because my attempts to contact you directly were ignored. Because you moved 8 times in 15 years, always staying one step ahead of my people. Because you were determined to keep my son from me no matter what. He pulled out a thick folder and slid it across the desk. Do you know what's in here, Frances? 23 years of surveillance reports. Birthday parties I couldn't attend. School plays I couldn't watch. Graduations where I should have been in the audience. Brandon opened the folder, his face paling as he flipped through photographs of himself at every stage of his life. School pictures, candid shots of him playing sports, images of his wedding day with Melissa. You've been watching me my entire life? His voice cracked slightly. I've been loving you from a distance, Marcus corrected. Waiting for the day when you were old enough to make your own choices about whether you wanted to know your father. And Melissa? Marcus sighed. 3 years ago, I decided I couldn't wait any longer. The cancer diagnosis was real. I am dying, though not as quickly as I'd hoped when this started. I hired Melissa to get close to you, to gain your trust, to eventually bring you to me. But she fell in love with him, I said, remembering her words at my front door. She did. Marcus's expression grew complicated, which created problems I hadn't anticipated. Melissa started delaying, making excuses, finding reasons to postpone our meeting. She wanted to protect Brandon from this world. Brandon looked up from the folder. So you threatened her? I reminded her of her obligations. But she became emotional. Irrational. Tonight, when she finally brought you to me, it wasn't because she wanted to. It was because she was desperate. Desperate enough to try to kill me? Brandon's voice was sharp with anger. Marcus's face darkened. She did what? She tried to poison my dinner. When that didn't work, she came at me with a knife. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Marcus's hands clenched into fists on his desk, and I saw a flash of the violence that had made him so feared in the criminal underworld. Victor, he said quietly. Yes, boss. Bring Melissa to me. Now. Within minutes, Victor returned with Melissa between 2 guards. She looked smaller somehow, her confidence from earlier completely gone. When she saw Marcus's expression, she actually took a step backward. You tried to kill my son? Marcus's voice was deadly calm. I panicked, Melissa whispered. I thought if something happened to him before he met you, maybe you just give up. Move on. You thought I would give up on my only child? I thought I could save him from this life. Marcus stood slowly, his movements controlled but predatory. You thought you could save him by murdering him? I wasn't thinking clearly. I couldn't bear the thought of him becoming like. She caught herself before finishing the sentence. Like me. Marcus smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Like his father. Brandon rose from his chair. Enough. I'm tired of everyone making decisions about my life without asking what I want. The entire room fell silent. Marcus turned to his son with something like pride in his eyes. And what do you want, Brandon? I want the truth. All of it. No more lies, no more manipulation. No more people claiming to protect me by keeping me in the dark. Brandon looked between his parents, the woman who'd raised him and the man whose blood he carried. I want to know exactly who my father is, what this business involves, and what it would mean if I chose to be part of it. Marcus nodded slowly. That's fair. That's more than fair. He walked to a wall safe hidden behind one of his expensive paintings and withdrew a thick binder. This contains everything. Financial records, organizational charts, details of every operation we run. The legitimate businesses and the ones that aren't so legitimate. Brandon took the binder with steady hands. How long do I have to decide? Take all the time you need. But understand that time is something I don't have much of left. As Brandon began reading, I felt my world shifting once again. My son was no longer the innocent man I tried so hard to protect. He was becoming something else, someone who could look at criminal enterprises and make rational decisions about them. And that terrified me more than Marcus ever had. Brandon spent 3 hours reading through Marcus's files while I sat in mounting horror, watching my son's expression change with each page he turned. The innocent man who'd arrived at my door that evening was disappearing, replaced by someone who could analyze human trafficking routes and money laundering schemes with the same calm focus he'd once applied to his marketing reports. The legitimate businesses are impressive, Brandon said finally, closing the binder. Resort chains, construction companies, shipping operations. You've built a real empire. Marcus smiled with genuine pride. Everything above board generates about 60% of our revenue now. I've been working toward full legitimacy for the past decade. And the other 40%? Is why I need someone I can trust to help me transition completely out of the darker enterprises. I couldn't stay silent any longer. Brandon, you can't seriously be considering this. Why not? He turned to face me, and I saw Marcus's calculating intelligence in his eyes. He's offering me a chance to transform a criminal organization into something legitimate. To use the resources he's built for good instead of harm. Those resources were built on the suffering of innocent people, I said desperately. The money that paid for this house, these cars, this entire lifestyle. It came from destroying lives. I know. Brandon's acknowledgement was quiet but firm. I've read the files, Mom. I know exactly what he's done. But I also know that I can't change the past. I can only decide what happens next. Marcus leaned back in his chair, watching our exchange with interest. Your mother protected you from this world because she believed it would corrupt you. But I think she underestimated your strength. I warned him. Don't manipulate him the way you manipulated me. I'm not manipulating anyone. Marcus's voice was calm. I'm offering him a choice that no one offered me when I was his age. I inherited this organization from my father, who inherited it from his father. Violence and criminality were the only options I knew. He stood and walked to the window overlooking his manicured grounds. But Brandon was raised by you, Francis. He has your moral compass, your sense of right and wrong. He could accomplish what I never could. End the cycle. Brandon set the binder aside and looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Mom, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. My stomach clenched. What? When you made that deal 23 years ago, when you agreed to take the money and disappear, were you protecting me, or were you protecting yourself? The question hit me like a physical blow. What do you mean? I mean, you could have gone to the FBI with everything you knew. You could have put Marcus in prison and eliminated the threat entirely. Instead, you took $38 million and ran. I felt the blood drain from my face. Brandon, it wasn't that simple. Wasn't it? His voice was gentle but relentless. You had enough evidence to destroy his entire organization. You chose money instead of justice. Marcus watched our confrontation with something that looked like satisfaction. This was what he'd wanted, to drive a wedge between Brandon and me, to make my son question everything I'd taught him. I chose to keep you safe, I said weakly. Did you? Or did you choose to keep yourself safe from having to testify, from having to face the consequences of your own choices? The words hung in the air between us like an accusation. For 23 years, I told myself that everything I'd done was for Brandon's protection. But looking at my son's face now, I had to confront an uncomfortable truth. Maybe he was right. Maybe I had taken the money because it was easier than doing what was right. You want complete honesty? I stood up, my legs unsteady. Fine. You're right. I could have brought down his entire organization. I had photographs, financial records, witness testimony. Everything the FBI needed. Brandon's expression didn't change, but I saw disappointment flicker in his eyes. But you have to understand what that would have meant, I continued desperately. Years of trials, death threats, living in witness protection for the rest of our lives. I couldn't give you a normal childhood if we were constantly looking over our shoulders. So instead, you gave me a childhood where we counted pennies while you sat on millions of dollars? Brandon's voice was cold. Where I worked 3 jobs to pay for college while you had enough money to send me to Harvard? I was protecting the money for emergencies. No, Mom. You were punishing yourself. And you were punishing me along with you. Marcus spoke quietly from his position by the window. Your mother carries guilt that isn't hers to bear. She blames herself for falling in love with me, for not seeing through my deception sooner. She spent 23 years trying to atone for choosing love over duty. Don't you dare analyze my motivations, I snapped at him. Someone needs to. Marcus turned to face us both. Because your guilt has poisoned your relationship with your son, and prevented him from understanding his own worth. He walked over to Brandon and placed a hand on his shoulder. You are not responsible for my sins or your mother's choices. You are responsible only for what you do next. I watched my son absorb those words, saw him straightening as if a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. This was exactly what Marcus had planned, to position himself as the reasonable father figure while making me look like the irrational, controlling mother. But I wasn't finished fighting. Brandon, look around this room, I said, forcing strength into my voice. Look at the paintings on these walls. Do you see that Monet? It was stolen from a Jewish family during World War II and never returned. That sculpture? It was looted from a museum in Syria last year. Marcus's jaw tightened slightly, but he didn't deny my accusations. Every beautiful thing in this house, every comfort you see, was purchased with blood money. Your father wants you to believe he's changed, that he's building something legitimate, but he's still the same man who threatened to sell his own infant son. People can change, Brandon said quietly. Can they? I walked over to Marcus's desk and opened the top drawer before he could stop me. Inside was a loaded pistol and beneath it, a manila folder. I pulled out the folder and threw it on the desk. Then explain this. Brandon opened the folder and his face went white. Inside were surveillance photographs of me from the past month, leaving my apartment, grocery shopping, meeting with clients. But more disturbing were the photos of other people. A middle-aged woman getting into her car, a young man walking his dog, an elderly couple sitting on a park bench. Who are these people? Brandon asked. Marcus's composure finally cracked. Francis, you don't understand what you're doing. These are the other witnesses from 23 years ago, I said, my voice shaking with anger. The people who could have testified against your father if I'd gone through with the prosecution. Brandon flipped through more photographs, each one showing people going about their normal lives, unaware they were being watched. 6 months ago, when Marcus learned he was dying, he didn't just send Melissa to find you. He sent people to eliminate anyone who could still threaten him. That's not, Marcus started. Look at the dates on these photos, I interrupted. March 15th, Agent Sarah Chun, found dead in her apartment, apparent suicide. April 3rd, Detective Mike Rodriguez, fatal car accident. May 27th, Federal Prosecutor Linda Walsh, heart attack at age 45. Brandon's hands were shaking as he read the names and dates. These people are dead? All of them. Every single person who could have corroborated my testimony is gone. I looked directly at Marcus. Except me. The silence in the room was deafening. Brandon set the folder down carefully and looked at his father with new understanding. You've been killing people, he said quietly. I've been protecting my family, Marcus replied, but his voice lacked conviction. By murdering innocent people? By ensuring that the past stays buried so that you and I can have a future. Brandon stood up slowly and I saw my son, my real son, the one I'd raised to know right from wrong, finally emerge. There is no future, he said, his voice steady and final. Not for us. Not built on this foundation. Marcus's face crumpled. Brandon, please. I'm dying. You're all I have left. No, Brandon said firmly. I'm all she has left. And unlike you, she never asked me to compromise my soul for her love. He turned to me, and for the first time in hours I saw warmth in his eyes. Mom, I need you to call your FBI contacts. All of them. Tonight. Marcus reached for something inside his jacket, but Victor was faster. The enforcer's gun was trained on his boss before Marcus could draw his weapon. Sorry, boss, Victor said calmly. But I think the smart money is on the sun now. The room erupted into chaos, and I realized that this night was far from over. Victor's betrayal of Marcus shouldn't have surprised me, but it did. In the criminal world, loyalty only exists as long as it's profitable, and Victor had clearly decided that Brandon represented a better future than his dying boss. You've been planning this, Marcus said, his voice hollow with realization. How long? Since the cancer diagnosis, Victor replied, keeping his weapon trained on Marcus while addressing Brandon. Smart bosses prepare for succession. Marcus, he was too emotional about you to think clearly. I trusted you, Marcus whispered. You trusted me to protect the organization. That's what I'm doing. Brandon looked between them with disgust. I don't want your organization. I don't want any of this. Maybe not now, Victor said with a slight smile. But give it time. Power has a way of growing on people. No. Brandon's voice was ice cold. It doesn't. He pulled out his phone and started dialing. Marcus made a desperate lunge toward him, but Victor's warning shot into the ceiling stopped him cold. FBI emergency line, Brandon said into the phone. I need to report multiple murders and I have evidence of an ongoing criminal enterprise. While Brandon spoke to the authorities, I watched Marcus crumble. The powerful crime boss I'd once feared was reduced to a broken old man facing the destruction of everything he'd built. Francis, he said quietly, ignoring Victor's gun to look at me. I loved you. Whatever else you believe, that was real. I know, I replied, and surprisingly I meant it. But love isn't enough when it's built on lies and violence. I could have been different. If you'd stayed, if you'd helped me change. No, I interrupted firmly. I couldn't fix you, Marcus. No one could. You had to want to be better, and you never did. The sound of sirens in the distance marked the beginning of the end. Within minutes, the compound was surrounded by federal agents, local police, and tactical teams. The fortress that Marcus had built to keep the world out became a prison that trapped him inside. As FBI agents flooded into the study, I felt a strange sense of déjà vu. 23 years ago, I'd walked away from bringing down this organization. Tonight, my son was finishing what I'd started. Agent Sarah Mitchell, who I recognized from old case files, approached me with a mixture of professionalism and curiosity. Mrs. McKenna, we're going to need extensive debriefing from you. The evidence you've provided tonight could unravel one of the largest criminal networks on the East Coast. I'll tell you everything, I promised. Every detail I remember from 26 years of investigation. Brandon finished giving his statement and walked over to me. His face was exhausted but peaceful in a way I hadn't seen in years. How do you feel? I asked him. Free, he said simply. For the first time in my life, I feel completely free. Victor was being led away in handcuffs, his attempt to position himself as Marcus's successor having backfired spectacularly. The other guards and employees were being processed, some as witnesses, others as accomplices. Marcus sat in a chair looking every one of his 68 years, waiting for the agents to finish cataloging evidence before arresting him. When our eyes met across the room, I saw something I'd never expected: gratitude. "He's glad it's over," Brandon observed, following my gaze. "I think you're right. I think he's been carrying this burden for so long that part of him is relieved to finally put it down." Agent Mitchell returned with a thick folder. "Mrs. McKenna, we found something in Marcus Volkov's safe that belongs to you." She handed me an envelope with my name written in Marcus's handwriting. Inside was a letter dated 6 months ago, along with legal documents transferring the $38 million back to the FBI's Recovered Assets Fund. The letter was brief. "Francis, if you're reading this, then my son has chosen justice over family loyalty. I'm proud of him for that, even though it means my destruction. The money I gave you was stolen from victims who deserved better. I've arranged for it to be returned to their families or donated to organizations that help trafficking survivors. I hope this small act of restitution helps you forgive yourself for the choices we both made 26 years ago. You were always the better person, and you raised our son to be better than both of us. Thank you for that, Marcus." I showed the letter to Brandon, watching his expression shift from surprise to something that looked like peace. "He really did change," Brandon said quietly. "Maybe. Or maybe he just finally understood what he'd lost." 3 hours later, we walked out of Marcus's compound together. The dawn sky was painted in soft pinks and golds, a beautiful contrast to the darkness we'd left behind. "What happens now?" Brandon asked as we got into the FBI vehicle that would take us home. "Now we rebuild," I said. "Honestly this time. No more secrets, no more lies. I'm sorry for what I said earlier, about you choosing money over justice." I shook my head. "Don't apologize. You were right. I did make that choice, and it cost us both 23 years of living authentically. But you were protecting me. I was protecting myself too. And that's okay. We're allowed to be imperfect, Brandon. We're allowed to make choices out of fear and still learn from them." The agent driving us glanced in the rearview mirror. "Mrs. McKenna, there's going to be a substantial reward for your cooperation in this case. The assets we've recovered, the victims will be able to help. It's significant." I looked at Brandon, who smiled and nodded. "Donate it," I said. "All of it. To organizations that help trafficking survivors and families of victims." "Are you sure? It could be several $1,000,000. "I'm sure. I've spent 23 years learning that some money isn't worth keeping." 2 weeks later, Brandon moved in with me temporarily while he sorted out his life. His marriage to Melissa was over. She was facing charges for attempted murder and conspiracy, but he seemed more relieved than devastated. I keep thinking about what Victor said. He told me one evening as we cooked dinner together, about power growing on you. Do you think I could have ended up like him if I'd made different choices? "No," I said without hesitation. "You want to know how I'm so sure?" "How?" "Because you asked the question. People who are capable of becoming monsters never worry about becoming monsters." He smiled, the first genuinely happy expression I'd seen from him since childhood. "I've been thinking about what I want to do next," he said. "I want to go back to school, study law, maybe criminal justice. I want to understand how these organizations work, so I can help bring them down." "That sounds perfect. And I want to do it openly this time. No fake poverty, no hiding who we are or what we've been through. Our story might help other people who are trapped in situations like this." I nodded, feeling a weight I'd carried for decades finally lifting from my shoulders. "No more shadows." "No more shadows," he agreed. 6 months later, I stood in a federal courtroom watching Marcus receive multiple life sentences for his crimes. He looked frail in his orange jumpsuit, the cancer finally taking its visible toll, but his eyes found mine across the crowded gallery. He mouthed 2 words. "Thank you." I didn't respond, but I understood what he meant. By finally bringing him to justice, we'd freed him from a life that had become its own kind of prison. After the sentencing, Brandon and I walked out of the courthouse together into bright afternoon sunshine. Reporters shouted questions, but we ignored them. Our story was our own now, not theirs to sensationalize. "Any regrets?" Brandon asked as we reached our car. I thought about it for a moment, really thought about it. The years of secrecy, the money we'd lived without, the relationship we'd nearly lost, the people who died while I stayed silent. No, I said finally. No regrets. Everything we went through led us to this moment, to being able to choose truth over fear. I wouldn't change that. Brandon hugged me, and I felt the last of the barriers between us finally crumble. We drove home together, two survivors who'd found their way back to each other, ready to build something real from the ashes of our shared past. For the first time in 23 years, we were truly free.